Hospital Porter's Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to HPANWO TV and welcome to this, a read party for The Doomsday Conspiracy by Sidney Sheldon. And you're not going to believe this, but it's an entire year, almost. In fact, it is, yeah. It's the 28th today. It is literally 1 year to the day that I uploaded the introduction to this read party. Now, it hadn't occurred to me, I hadn't checked, because a couple of days ago, I decided I would finally do the review for this read party, which I started some time in the past, and I thought, time's getting on now. It's time to have the read party review. Enough people will have read the book by now, so let's just get on with it and do the review. And I hadn't really thought, it must have been something subconscious, but I must have realized, wow, it's actually an entire year ago, well, close to a year, and it was, and it is. It would have been the other day. I was going to do this actually on Tuesday, but then I was going to do it on but then the whole Julian Assange thing kicked up, and then of course by then that had to take priority. So the day I was going to do it on Tuesday, I was going to make this video on Tuesday, and then the Julian Assange thing started, so I thought, well, I'm going to have to do that. I'm going to have to do this instead. I've got no other, obviously with Assange has to sort of like, I suppose that has to come first because that was like an emergency situation and it just popped up. But now, I thought to myself, okay, I will do the review at some point because there's a number of watch and read parties I've started and I haven't finished yet. So I need to get them done. I need to start getting the reviews done, and then we go from there. So this is the one for the Doomsday Conspiracy. Now, the Doomsday Conspiracy by Sidney Sheldon. I did the introduction to this. I'll just do a quick recap of things. Sidney Sheldon actually died a couple of years ago. This is this chap here. He died about 4 years ago, and this is him. And you can see pictures of him, various pictures of him. This is him when he was younger. This is him just soon before he died. And I said at the time, he seems like you can't, I don't know him, never met him, but he has a sort of smile on his face and the various facial expressions, from what you can gather, that makes me think he was a nice guy. He was a good guy. Just you get these sort of, you just get these feelings, you know what I mean? Which is just sort of one of the strange. It's obviously I'm not going to judge a guy by that, but it's just the sense I get. He was over 100, I think, when he died. So yeah, he was getting on a bit. I could find out exactly how old he was, but he was pretty old when he died. I'll find out exactly how old he was when he popped off. But he was yes, he's 89 years old, born the 11th of February 1917. Oh no, he didn't die a couple of years ago. He died in 2007, age 89 years. Right, sorry. I thought he died sooner than that. Maybe that's the Mandela effect. I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, this is the book. This is my favorite cover of the book, definitely. This is the cover of the book I got. See, I bought this when it first came out. I saw it in a bookshop and picked it up. Thought it looked interesting. Sorry, you have Russell's face on it if you want. It's quite appropriate, actually, considering the subject matter. If Russell's face slightly intersects it, because if you read the book, you'll know that it's all very relevant. That's actually quite a good tableau for the entire story, I would say. This is the actual cover of the book that I got. So this is the edition I got when I bought it. So I assume that's kind of a first edition, because I actually got the book in 1990 when it came out in 1991. Now, if you look at if you go and Google the images, you'll see there are lots of different, I don't know if they're different editions, but there's lots of different covers to them. And some of them are not so, some of them are a bit strange. So, for example, this one doesn't really tell you. It's suspense, intrigue, and passion from the world's favorite storyteller. That, to me, looks more like some kind of like romance type, kind of power story, the kind of thing that Sidney Sheldon is actually most famous for, the sort of family the family struggles and the sort of power struggles of the wealthy. That's this is another very, very plain cover there. I don't see the point of that cover. It's this one. Now that's a bit better. That sort of fits more with how things are. There's this one. Again, that's the covers don't give much away. Actually, see that looks like something to do with a medieval battle Anyway. So what's the book about? Well, the book it's a thriller, and it's a very fast-paced thriller full of intrigue and suspense. As I said in the introduction, it was this book that inspired Dan Brown to write, and in the style that he does, and indeed it is very Dan Brown in style. It is centered around a man called Robert Bellamy. he's the main character. As with Dan Brown, there's a single main character and like a supporting cast of others. And also, as with Dan Brown, people are not always whom they seem to be. Even some of the characters who are very close to the central protagonist, it turns out that they are very often, as indeed with the Inferno, especially with the Inferno, the book, the most recent Dan Brown book I reviewed, people very close to the protagonist can be playing one role when really their real role is another. Now, Robert Bellamy is I'm going to include some spoilers in this, by the way, so there will be spoilers. I'm assuming this is a review. You've had an entire year now. If you haven't read the book by now, then you can't really take part in this read party. You can still watch the video if you like, but there are going to be spoilers. Now, Robert Bellamy, he's a very troubled man because he's very much in love with his wife, who's his strange wife, who's just divorced him. Her name's Susan. And which is pointless because you see, obviously, I had a partner called Susan as well, which was sort of quite sad. I kind of imagine the character as being like Sue Stain, actually. You know, I don't know about you, but I picture when I'm reading the book, I always picture the characters. I can almost see them in my head, and I'm almost like adapting them into a. I'm almost adapting them into a. I'm almost adapting them into a kind of movie inside my mind, and I can see the characters. They have the faces and certain faces and voices, and sometimes they look like people I know. Sometimes they are literally like actors and famous celebrities and people like that. That's what I love about reading. I don't know if you do that when I read, but I do. But anyway, yes, Susan has split up from her husband. I mean, indeed, it's been revealed there was a cause behind their divorce. And she's married a man. She's married this billionaire called Monty Banks. And Robert rather scathingly nicknames him Moneybags. It's actually very much, it's painful for somebody when their relationship splits up. If they are traded in for someone else, and very often we found, I'm sure women do this as well, but men, we tend to compare ourselves to the person who's cuckolded us, who's like taken our partner from us. If we're traded in for someone else, I mean, this happened. Obviously, the guy I was traded in for, I never even met him, but he was someone very inferior to myself. But I don't know if that makes it better or worse. But in this case, Robert he's been cuckolded by a man who's conventionally much more successful than he is. And so Robert nicknames him Moneybags, and Susan always corrects him. His name is Monty Banks. Anyway, Robert is he's an intelligence officer. He actually is in the Office of Naval Intelligence as a case officer, and there's lots of flashbacks in his life actually, because he was a soldier in the Vietnam War and he flew a plane for the US Navy. And there's a scene where he's with this guy called Edward, who's his co-pilot. Edward is shot down. They're shot down, and Edward is killed, and Robert is very badly injured, and he's in hospital. He actually meets Susan in hospital because she's a nurse looking after him, and the doctor's like says, "Oh, don't worry about it. He's not going to make it. Leave him, because obviously we've got a ward full of injured soldiers here. We need to prioritize." And sometimes, like, doctors have to make tough decisions like that, unfortunately. In this case, and they do that in the NHS as well, obviously, although it's much less public. Leave him, he's finished. We've got to go and work on someone else and use our resources on somebody else. And she says no, and she looks at him, she says, "Wake up, sailor, don't die," she says to him. And that's how they meet, and they fall in love. It's all very romantic, perhaps excessively so. And but the thing is, Edward, the young man who died, he has a father called Admiral Ralph Whitaker. And Admiral Whitaker becomes he kind of adopts Robert after Edward is lost, almost as if the man who was in the plane beside his son, sitting beside his son in the plane, almost takes the place of the son he lost. So Admiral Whittaker becomes his kind of like stepfather, I suppose. Unofficially, of course, but still a stepfather. It's a bit like me and Barry. You remember me telling you about Barry, the man who died? It's a bit like that. Unofficially, kind of unofficially adopts him. Now, Whittaker, what happens is that Robert is called. He's given a call. There's this rather the opening of the book. I mean, there's the curse at the beginning. I'll show you this. May you live in interesting times. Ancient Chinese curse. We've heard that a lot lately, haven't we? And I'm sure we are. And in the prologue, it starts very. It's a lot of mystery in it, just like with Dan Brown. It's just you're just given this description of a group of 10 people just staring into the field, horrified, too dumb to speak, at a place called Udendorf in Switzerland. They're like tourists on a bus, and they see something. And there's a priest, and there's this young woman from Russia, and there's these other people, and they're just staring into the depths, thinking, "Oh my God!" There's the bus driver and everyone else. Oh my God! And the priest says, "Armageddon is coming," and then you get these radio messages, these like government-style radio message, flash message, top secret, ultra. NSA, National Security Agency, to Deputy Director ComSec, Communications Security. Subject, Operation Doomsday. Activate, and then notify NORAD and these various other agencies. End of message. These like radio messages, and it says flash message. NSA to Deputy Director Naval Intelligence, Commander Robert Bellamy, emergency transfer. So typical sort of like hero in these kinds of stories. He's this intelligence agency, and he gets this cryptic message to transfer to the National Security Agency. He doesn't know why. And then, and it says, so this, what is Operation Doomsday? We don't know, but there's the title is the Doomsday Conspiracy. So Robert Bellamy's woken up at 4 a.m. and told to get to Fort Meade, the headquarters of the NSA. The thing is, he's thinking Bellamy's a troubled man. He's in his 40s. He's tormented by dreams of his wife and how he's lost her and he loves her and everything like that. You can't sort of get over her, and it's true. I mean, if you really love someone and they're gone, whether they die or whether they run off with someone else, it's difficult to get over it. You know, some people find it easier to get over that than others. You know, they do. And so this action is interspersed with his memories, with flashbacks and things like that, which gives you an idea about what kind of character he is. And so he's woken up at 4 a.m. and told to get to Fort Meade. Now he's thinking of quitting altogether the intelligence agencies. He doesn't know what he's going to do with his life. He's got no plans for another job. He's thinking of quitting. He doesn't like his boss. His boss is called Dustin Thornton, and there's a kind of like James Bond type relationship between him and, you know, the head of the intelligence, various people. So, for example, the guy, his boss is a guy called Dustin Thornton, who's very much a bureaucratic by the book man, which is probably why he was promoted so quickly. Whereas Robert is still like a field agent. And so Dustin Thornton, head of ONI, there was a time when Robert was behind enemy lines. Well, it was in the Cold War. He was in East Germany. He had to extract an agent who'd been identified, and so Robert's task was to go in there and get this agent out and defect them, to get them to defect to the West, knowing that if they'd been found, the Stasi, the East German security services, would arrest this person and then they torture and kill this guy. They torture him for information and then kill him. They were brutal, the Stasi. They really were. And so Robert has to get him out. And then Thornton gets hold of him and says, "Well, this," and says some. What was the details of this? I read this a while ago. I've read it twice now. But he says, "You've got to." He says, "Commander Bellamy, we've actually decided we're not going to do this now. We've weighed up the pros and cons, and we've decided it's not really very, very expedient at this time." A typical kind of like managerial type person. And Bellamy basically does what James Bond does. You know, he just says, "Fuck you! I'm getting him out. This man will die if we don't do something." And so he manages to extract this agent against the orders of his superior. So it's a very typical kind of like American thriller type heroic kind of person, which is because immediately you warm to that character, because that's the kind of thing I think most people who have a sense of conscience would want to be like that. And we don't. I mean, none of us know what we would do in any situation unless we were in it. But if I was in that situation, I'd say I would be proud of myself if I did something like that. I'd be proud of myself if I said I will not obey that order. I'll take the rap. You can court-martial me or something, but I'm going to get this man out, because if I don't, he'll die slowly and painfully in the bloody prisons in Berlin. So I'm getting him out. And so he did, and Thornton was furious with him because we gave you instructions and you didn't obey them. It's gross misconduct to do that sort of thing. It's very unprofessional, and it's very inappropriate, and all these other things that these bloody walking tape recorders talk about. Maybe that's why I was a basic grade porter for 23 years. So it's good. I've got my uniform on there because of my reunion. I've got my other uniform behind me, which is nice. So that brings up this point. So, but anyway, the guy he's got to see is this guy who's in charge of the NSA, and this guy called Edward Sanderson. And so he invites him, and so Robert Bellamy says, "What's all this about? What's all this about?" And so he says, "We have a problem. We have a problem, Commander. We need your help." He says, "Yes, sir." The general stood up and began to pace. "What I am about to tell you is extremely sensitive. It is above top secret." It's in that phrase "above top secret" is interesting, because that is the title, of course, of Timothy Good's famous book, of which was actually a source of research which Sheldon did. As I explained in the introduction, Sheldon did a lot of research into ufology. He actually learned a lot, and having read through the author's note at the end, I'm quite impressed with how much he learned. He also got JJ and Desiree Hurtak as consultants on the book. I met the Hurtaks. I don't know if you saw. I don't think I actually filmed them, but they were at Contact in the desert, and I didn't actually speak to them, but I saw JJ and Desiree from a distance. I saw them. I met them in 2008, actually, in Glastonbury. But I mean, there is actually no such thing as above top secret. It's a kind of like a qualitative phrase. It means something that is top secret and very sensitive. Well, the classification works like it goes from confidential to secret to top secret. But then there's nothing technically above top secret. There's just top secret, and there's a code word. The top secret is the clearance of the person involved. So the person has to be cleared for top secret information. Then they have to have a need to know, which means they have to be cleared for the code word of the project. So top secret Doomsday, for example, which would be in this case top secret Doomsday, top secret Magenta, top secret Ultra. There's different code words. And then, so anyway, he carries on like this. He says, "What I'm about to tell you is extremely sensitive. It's above top secret." "Yes, sir," says Bellamy. "Yesterday in the Swiss Alps, a NATO weather balloon crashed. A NATO weather balloon. You know where I'm going with this, don't you? You know where this book is going. A NATO weather balloon crashed. There were some experimental military objects aboard the balloon that are highly sensitive." Robert found himself wondering where all this was leading. Well, we know where this is going to lead, don't we? The Swiss government has removed these objects from the balloon, but unfortunately it seems that there are some witnesses to the crash. It is of vital importance that none of them talk to anyone about what they saw. It could provide valuable information to certain other countries. Do you follow me? Robert: "I think so, sir. You want me to speak to the witnesses and warn them not to discuss what they saw?" "Not exactly, Commander." "Then I don't understand." "What I want you to do, Robert, is to simply track down those witnesses. Others will talk to them about the necessity for silence." "I see," says Robert. "Are the witnesses all in Switzerland?" "That's our problem, Commander. You see, we have no idea where they are. The only information we have is they were on the tour bus, right? And then it happened to be passing near the scene where the weather balloon crashed near the little village of Udendorf in Switzerland. The passengers got off the bus for a few minutes to look at the crash, then continued on. When the tour ended, the passengers dispersed." Okay, so Robert then he has breakfast with Admiral Whittaker, who's like his stepfather, like a sort of surrogate stepfather, and then he goes off on this mission. At the same time, then the scene cuts away to a secret meeting of various people. And there's no explanation for this. Dan Brown does this a lot as well. There's a little there's a cryptic scene where they say a number of people were gathered around a table. One of them was called Janus. There's a mysterious individual at the center of this story called Janus, who is head of this group that's trying to deal with this weather balloon situation. And so so Janus is he chairs this meeting with various individuals from various countries, and he sort of knows them all. He has this kind of like feeling of, he says his code name was Janus. He was addressing 12 men in the heavily guarded room of a military compound. As you have all been informed, Operation Doomsday has been activated, and there's various people. Who are we using? The Russian. Whenever he mentions these people's name, he just says what they're. Janus is kind of like the central character of this scene. He just describes what country they come from and mentions aspects of them because he's got them sussed. You see, he knows them. The Russian, huge. What are we using? The Russian, huge, short-tempered. His name is Commander Robert Bellarmine. How was he selected? The German, aristocratic, ruthless. May I inquire about his qualifications? The Japanese, polite, sly. Is he aware of the urgency of this? The Englishman, snobbish, dangerous. He is, and then there's the Frenchman. Does he understand the purpose of the mission? The Frenchman, argumentative, stubborn. No, because Robert doesn't. Robert's not really told what's going on. And when he has found the witness, said the Chinese, clever, patient, he will be suitably rewarded. Right, well, suitably rewarded. So basically what happens in the rest of the story, what happens during the story? Now, the Chinese guy comes back into it again because this is what I mean when I say that you don't, no one knows exactly whose side is anyone on. But he has to basically, what happens is he searches for these witnesses. He looks for them everywhere. And eventually he tracks them down. But you see, all he does is he finds out who they are. And to do that, he just goes like to the tourist agency in Switzerland. And then he hands that information back to the NSA. Then what happens next is that these people mysteriously die. One of them is murdered. There's a Russian woman who's murdered in a forest near Moscow. There's an English guy who took photographs of the weather balloon and thinks he's going to be really famous. It's the English guy's actually very kind of he's a bit up himself actually, because he's one of these sort of envious wannabes. He has this amazing film on his camera. Who remembers filming cameras? Yeah, I'm showing my age now, but this was in 1991. So he took some photographs of these of the weather balloon, and he's gone back to London to develop the pictures, and he's going to sell them to newspapers and make a fortune. I mean, how naive can you get? And he's so up himself. He thinks he goes out to a posh restaurant and blows his last money on a posh meal, and he finds himself sitting next to some famous actors. I think it was Roger Moore and Sean Connery and a couple of other, Richard Harris, or what's his name, Robert Harris and Sean Connery. And he goes up to them and he says, "Can I have your autographs, please, gentlemen? I really respect you." And of course, yeah, they sign their autographs for him, and he just rips them up and throws them away. I'm going to be more famous than you. So but when he goes back to his laboratory, he goes back to his little dark room, his laboratory, his photographic laboratory in a flat. He's got this cheap flat in London, or as cheap as London gets. And yes, see, this was in the days. Anyone younger than me may not remember this, but you actually had to develop the film with chemicals and things like that, and create prints. You couldn't just like copy them to your PC and then edit them and things like that with like you do with with a JPEG or something. And so when he's starting to develop the photos, but then suddenly he smells burning and he realizes there's a fire in his flat, which didn't start by accident, of course. He tries to get out of his dark room, but the door's locked. He can't get out. So that's how he meets his end. The priest is poisoned. I remember the priest gets poisoned, and the bus driver's driving. He's driving along in Switzerland, and there's this young girl at the side of the road saying, "Oh, please help me, please help me." So he takes her. So he gives her a lift, but then she pretends to seduce him and kills him. so that they're all just disappearing. When now Robert finds out about this, Robert finds out that these people suddenly realizes that all these people these names he's handing over to his superiors on this mission, they're suddenly dying. Whichever country they're in, it's like the intelligence agencies of each country are being told that about these people, and then they're going out and killing them in hits, in organized hits. So obviously it's like the guy who killed it's the KG. I don't know if it's the KGB. This is post-Cold War, was it? But the FSB who killed the young woman in the park in Moscow. It was British intelligence, MI5 or someone who killed the man in his darkroom in London. It was the Vatican intelligence who kills the priest, etc. It's Swiss intelligence that kills the bus driver. And suddenly it's as if, my goodness me, it's almost as if these different intelligence agencies in different countries actually obey a higher authority than their own national government. See, so that's kind of what conspiracy theorists talk about, don't they? I reckon Sheldon was based, man. I reckon he was a really based guy. Because I reckon when was Master of the Game? Because I mentioned Master of the Game, didn't I? I mentioned that in the introduction. I reckon Sidney Sheldon was as based as hell, man. Let's have a look at his wiki. Let's have a look at Wikipedia and see what it has to say. All right, he says Master of the Game. Now, he wrote this. He published this in 1982. This is kind of on one level, like you say, on one level it is just like a dynastic power struggle type book. I said, the cover of the later editions of the Doomsday Conspiracy make it look like that, as if they're trying to. It feels as if they're trying to almost fool the readers into buying them, because these are people who are used to the kind of books that Sheldon writes. And so the publisher has made the book look like a typical Sheldon book, rather than this one, which may be different to the others. And I don't know, because I've only read one Sidney Sheldon book, which was this one, The Doomsday Conspiracy. Anyway, the Master of the Game, it's good. It's a very good... I read the TV miniseries that came from it, and it's about a... It starts off with a young Scottish guy in the 1880s who goes to South Africa to try and mine gold. And he basically, over a number of generations, for over a century, his family go through various tribulations. He becomes very rich, but then he eventually in the end, it ends with his daughter running the whole thing. It ends with his daughter. His daughter is an old woman at the very end, and she's still running the company. But it was actually. I think it was actually. Let me just see. I think it was a. I'm sure it was a. Let's just have a look. Where is it? Oh, Master of the Game. That one. Master of the Game, full movie. Yeah, this was actually a. Yes, here it is. You can actually get it on. It's actually been YouTubed. There it is. Master of the Game, episode 1, episode 2. Yeah, this is. You can see in the thumbnail. He's picking up a diamond. This is the main character. That's James McGregor, the main character there. He's picking up a diamond now. What happens is, this is why I think Sidney Sheldon is a conspiracy, or was a conspiracy theorist. I think he was one of us, because what happens in this, I've never read the book, like I say, but in the TV series, when he first gets to South Africa, James McGregor, this I think that's his name, fictional McGregor Blackwell family, yes. Jamie McGregor, that's right, Jamie McGregor. When he gets to South Africa, he's cheated by the first he works for a prospector, and he's actually cheated by this prospector. He gets his revenge on him in quite a nasty way, because it involves his daughter. But what he does is, before he does that, he manages to sneak into this secret compound on a beach. He actually swims through the sea on like a raft, a makeshift raft, to get to this beach. He almost dies, he almost drowns, along with this other guy. He teams up with this black man, and they together they build a raft, and they get almost drowned swimming to this beach, and the diamonds just lying in the sand to be picked up. What I mean is, you may have heard the term blood diamonds, and indeed the cover of the cover of Master of the Game actually has well, I showed it you in the introduction. I don't need to show it you again, but basically it includes a diamond with some blood dripping off it. There's a film called Blood Diamonds. What happens is the diamonds are actually in a compound. Now you may think, so why are they keeping them in a compound and not selling them, not mining them and selling them on the market and making a fortune? The reason is because availability. Anyone who knows about economics will know this. Availability has to be controlled in order to manipulate the price. They do the same thing with oil. There are some oil fields that are just left fallow. They're just left and they're never exploited because the OPEC and various other regulators are worried that and the oil companies are worried that if you just dump all this oil on the market, the price will drop precipitatively. And it would. And the same with diamonds. I mean, there's even a conspiracy. I don't actually agree with this, that diamonds, and if diamonds were just left to their own devices and people are allowed to mine them freely, they'd be worth about as much as pieces of glass. Now, I don't agree with that, but that's actually I do understand the point, and I think they wouldn't be as worthless as cheap as pieces of glass, but they'd be worth a lot less. The price of diamonds would collapse, which would badly affect the industry. De Beers and Lonrho, these other companies that are primarily based in Southern Africa, which controls it. It controls these various organisations. De Beers still exists. Lonrho is the London Rhodesia Company, again, which runs a number of diamond mines, and they control how many diamonds are mined. Now, Sidney Sheldon seems to what happens is, you see Jamie and his black friend Banda. What they do is they steal the diamonds from the beach, and then they get out before they're discovered, and then they sell them and make a fortune. They do like a Lord Nathan Rothschild type maneuver. You remember Nathan Rothschild, who he manipulated the stock market by telling people that Napoleon had won the Battle of Waterloo, and so everyone sells their stock at rock bottom prices, and Nathan buys it all up. And then when the true story comes out, Wellington won. Prices on the stock market go back up, and Nathan sells and makes a fortune. So this is Sheldon understands that, or understood it. I'm sure he still does in the spirit world wherever he is, but as a mortal man, he understood that, and he brought it out in his writing, which means I believe from at least 1982 he was a woo-woo. He was on our side. I mean, I'm curious to read some of his more later fiction, actually, to see if there's any more of these themes in it. I really am. How about that? Eh? Yeah. Anyway, so back as Ronnie Corbett used to say, on with the joke. So yeah, I think he was based, man. I think he was based. So I'm just going through my notes here, crossing off certain things. Now, when this happens, basically all the witnesses to this weather balloon are disappearing and dying. They're just dying in fires. They're being murdered. They're being poisoned. They're being assassinated left, right, and centre. Robert suddenly realizes something. He's going to be next. It's obvious that there's a massive cover-up to eliminate everyone who's had any contact with this weather balloon. Robert still thinks Robert has no reason to think it's anything else at the moment, but Robert then has to really realizes he's going to be next. He's obviously going to be next. So he basically goes undercover. He uses his skills as an intelligent agent to go undercover. And basically, this is where the Dan Brown storyline really kicks in, because he then is hunted by this group, this Janus and his organization. He's hunted in the same way that Dan Brown's characters get hunted, and he has to continuously run around from one place to another, evading them in various different ways. In doing so, he teams up with various people who help him. Again, then they get compromised and things like this. What's interesting is throughout he remains in contact with his wife, his ex-wife, and this is another thing where Dan Brown comes in, because the influence that Dan Brown got from Sheldon, because it involves secret codes. At one point, he wants to communicate something secretly to his wife, and he uses the word. Do you remember the palindrome? I don't know if you're familiar with a palindrome. A palindrome is a sentence, or a word or a sentence which reads the same backwards as forwards. And a famous one is Abel was here, I saw Elba. Abel was here, E-R-E, I saw Elba. Now, if you read that backwards, it's exactly the same. Abel was here, I saw Elba. There's various examples of palindromes. And the reason he says this to Susan is because he wants to communicate something to her which only they will understand. And so they use a very cryptic kind of secret, something which appeals to something they know between themselves, in the same way as I've said on previous videos, Harry Houdini did with his wife, when because when he said, when I die, just go to all the psychic mediums you can, and if it's really me, I'll come through with a secret code, and so you'll know it's me, and you'll know this medium is not just pulling your leg and cold reading you, and it's not a fraud. And of course, according to the skeptics, that never happened. But according to this book I read in 1983, it did happen. Harry did come through to his wife. Anyway, that's going too far off topic. I've done many videos about that, my skeptic videos. Now, the reason he sent this palindrome was because Abel was here, I saw Elba. Elba is a place. Is it an island, or is it what is Elba? I think it's an island, isn't it? I know Napoleon was there for a while. Elba Island in Italy. That's right. So Elba. Yeah. So that's right. It's in the Adriatic Sea, I believe. Yeah. No, it's not. It's in the Mediterranean, just off Corsica, between Italy and Corsica. That's right. So the reason is because when Robert and Susan got married, they had their honeymoon on Elba, and they must have mentioned at some point, they made a joke about the palindrome. Abel was here, I saw Elba. And there's others as well, because at one point he teams up with somebody, and this young girl in France, and she wants to know about, oh, you're a spy. Can you tell me something really, really cool about secret agents? And he says, yes, we have a little plan to warn others, right? If you approach a safe house and there's a problem with it and you shouldn't go in it, we lower all the blinds on the windows except one. So one is left open, and that's how you signal to an agent approaching a safe house not to go in, that the area has been compromised and you shouldn't go in. And he actually uses this at one point. He lowers all the blinds on the windows of the house and puts all the shutters. They use shutters in France, don't they? Especially in the south of France. He closes all the shutters except one to warn this girl. Yeah, it's a very interesting, that bit. Anyway, so he goes on. He spends the rest of the story is basically him on the run, and then you suddenly realize, again, this is very Dan Brown, you suddenly realize that even the people he thinks he can trust the most turn out to be working for the other side. But what's interesting is he works out eventually that the weather balloon that crashed in Uttendorf, Switzerland, was not actually a weather balloon. It was, yes, aliens. It's aliens. Yes, this is a Roswell type event. What's more, one of the aliens it's obviously a very humanoid type alien, because it's gone undercover as a human being. It's bought like human clothes. It's got hold of human clothes and is like wandering around. So there's several scenes about this, explaining how this alien is faring, walking around pretending to be human, and because it looks very human, it can get away with it. It looks like a human woman, and she's wandering around. It talks about her feelings of, it's very interesting actually, because Sheldon sort of puts himself in this alien's shoes, because she does have 2 feet, and thinks what it would be like for an alien. She describes the strange smells and sounds, about how she can't drink the water unless it's fresh. And she gets very ill at one point because she gets dehydrated, because she can't drink water from a tap because it's full of chemicals. She has to find fresh water, rainwater, or something like that. And eventually she gets in touch with, she eventually contacts Robert. And this is it. Robert realizes what's actually happened. And then he goes to the one man he thinks he can trust, this guy called Lee. Now, Lee is a Chinese agent who works as a double agent in China, when Robert was undercover in China on an operation similar to the event in East Germany, which I told you about before. Lee helped him out at enormous risk to himself, and Lee saved his life. And so Robert, there's the Chinese code of honor, which says if someone saves your life, you've got to save theirs. And so Robert is now kind of like a blood brother of Lee. You know, they're kind of bonded by that, according to Chinese tradition of chivalry. And so he thinks there's one man I can trust. It's Lee, this Chinese guy. So, oh, thank God I can finally. And then the interesting, because you get more secret codes. So what he does is he and Lee have this arrangement that he would always leave a secret code in a newspaper ad. It's just saying, Tilly, get in touch with John or something. Was it? And he leaves a number. Yeah, he leaves a number for someone called Tilly, and it says that it'd be like a personal ad, which is about someone called Tilly. Oh, codes work like this, incidentally. You know, codes can be very simple things which no one would spot unless you're an insider. You know, it's very interesting. There's another book actually that it's worth reading. It's this one. I've had it for ages. It's really good. This is I've talked about Ben McIntyre before, The Traitor and the Spy and the Traitor. It's a big hardback book. It's about a guy called Oleg Gordievsky. Now he was actually a British agent in the Soviet Union during the Cold War, and in the 80s. It's very interesting because for several reasons. Firstly, the KGB counterintelligence officer who was sent to track him down was called Vladimir Putin. Yes, him. Yes, the same one. But what happens? Gordievsky has to be extracted, and it's a very, very simple thing. A guy every day, a British agent will stand on a street corner holding a Mars bar in their hand. Sometimes it's a certain newspaper in the left hand or right hand. Something as simple as that. If you're not an insider, you would never even spot it. And Gordievsky, and information is communicated to Gordievsky in that way, and so he manages to get out. I mean, he's still living in hiding, actually, here in Britain. Unlike the Skripals, you know, there's still a price on his head. Even now, after he escaped over 40 years ago, but there's still a price on his head. Maybe it's personal because it was Putin who was tracking him down. You think he'd be forgiven now because, I mean, the Soviet Union has been gone over 30 years. I mean, what's the problem, you know? Anyway, on with the joke, as Ronnie Corbett used to say. So he leaves this ad in this newspaper, and eventually another ad appears indicating that Lee has communicated back. And so Robert manages to get in touch with him, goes to his flat. When he gets there, he suddenly finds out something. Well, he finds out Lee is. And what happens is when he gets to Lee's flat in Paris, Lee says, "Come inside," and Robert thinks, "Oh, thank God I found you." But then Lee says, "Look, have you heard of Operation Doomsday?" And Robert says, "Does it have anything to do with UFOs?" And Lee says, "Yes, it's got everything to do with UFOs. The world is facing disaster. Aliens are coming to Earth to destroy us. They're demanding that we shut down nuclear plants, stop burning fossil fuels, creating chemicals, rubber, plastics, because it's damaging the Earth. And they claim they're polluting the Earth and the sea. They want us to stop making weapons and waging war." And then Lee says, "A group of powerful men from a dozen countries have got together under a man with a code name Janus and organized intelligence agencies to form Operation Doomsday to stop the aliens." And then he talks about something interesting. I think this is obviously, I think Sidney Sheldon's come across Carol Rosin and her work, and Dr. Stephen Greer. He wrote this book actually pretty much when Greer entered the scene. So this would have been like about 1991 when he was writing this book, which is when Greer first appeared. He said, "Have you heard of SDI, Star Wars? A satellite system to shoot down Soviet intercontinental ballistic missiles?" Lee shook his head. So Lee said, no, that's the cover. SDI was not created to fight the Soviets. It is being designed to knock down UFOs. It's the only chance we have of stopping us. And it's like, this is exactly what Greer and Carol Rosin were walking about. Remember Carol Rosin talking at the press conference in 2001? She met Werner von Braun. He said, "The last card, Carol, the last card will be the evil aliens." So this comes straight out of that. And so Robert says, "You mean the governments are behind all this?" And Lee says, "Let's just say there are cabals within each government. Operation Doomsday is being run privately. Do you understand me now, Robert?" "My God," says Robert, "the governments aren't aware of that." And he says, "Lee, how did you learn this?" "It's very simple, Robert," said Lee. "I'm the Chinese connection." And he's, of course, the Chinese man in the meeting with Janus. The Chinese guy who is who's at the meeting I described earlier, where there's different people with Janus. And so Anyway, Robert escapes from Lee. He can't even trust Lee. But the one man in the world he can trust is Admiral Whittaker. Isn't that right? No. Unfortunately not, because then what happens is Robert realizes there's an 11th witness to this whole issue, which is the alien herself. And so he decides to do a deal. He contacts this Operation Doomsday and demands a meeting with Janus. And he's saying to them, he has because this alien gives him a piece of the. Well, Robert gets hold of a piece of debris from the crash, and then the alien eventually gets hold of it, so she could build a communication device and communicate with the mothership out in space. But then Robert decides to do a deal with Janus and Operation Doomsday for his life, just basically to say, look, I've got this 11th witness, this being, but in return, you've got to free me. So he demands a meeting at Utendorf with basically the whole of Operation Doomsday and its leader Janus. And so he drives there, and it's all at that time that it's all they decide to accept their offer. He even has a police escort to get him to the place safely, because he's badly injured in his fight. He has to fight Lee, and he kills Lee because he's shot and injured in it. And then he arrives at Utendorf. Now what happens then is that this helicopter arrives with Operation Doomsday people inside it, and they get out, and he suddenly finds out that Moneybags is involved, Monty Banks, who's like threatening his wife Susan. Susan eventually goes back to Robert, and Monty Banks' arrest is eventually well, what happens is Janus comes out of the helicopter, and it's Admiral Whittaker. You could almost guess. It's because by that time I kind of guessed there was something a bit weird about Whittaker, because I knew that other people weren't who they seemed to be in the book. So I thought, well, obviously Admiral Whittaker is Janus. I told you there'd be spoilers in this, didn't I? You've had a whole year to read it, so you can't complain. And then the mothership comes down and abducts Janus, Moneybags, and the head of the NSA. And the alien then just says, don't worry, we're just going to take them away and teach them a few things, and then we'll bring them back, whatever that means. They have much to learn. And then she says, you must. He gives this message. She gives this message to Robert and says, you must be the one who. She says there are thousands. She says they will not be harmed, referring to Whittaker and the others and Moneybags. They have much to learn. When they have learned, they will be brought back here. And then she says, tell people they must stop killing this planet. Make them understand. There are thousands of you. Every day your numbers grow. One day there will be millions. And you must all speak with one strong voice. Will you do it? And he says, I'll try. We're leaving now, says the alien, but we will be watching you, and we'll be back. Now, this is a very, very common theme with contactees. This idea that we're harming the planet through environmental destruction, also the dangers of war and nuclear weapons and things like that. And the aliens say, you must do something about this. You've got to change your ways, things like that. There's even there's a theory, and I mean, maybe it holds some validity, that we're like North Sentinel Island. We're the sort of intergalactic equivalent of North Sentinel Island. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with North Sentinel Island. It's a little island. I think it's only about 20 square miles. A little island in the Andaman Sea, just off the coast of Indonesia. It became quite famous because MH370 was in that area at one point, apparently. And it's actually a total exclusion zone. No one is allowed within about 10 miles of that island, and the Indian government, which administers the Andaman Islands, has ordered all shipping and all aircraft to stay out of that area. And the reason is because there are some people who live on North Sentinel Island, a community of people who are isolated. They have decided that they want nothing to do with the outside world. They are aware the outside world exists, unlike these guys in New Guinea and the Amazon who don't even know there is an outside world. You may have heard of these uncontacted tribes. The North Sentinelese know there's an outside world, but they don't want anything to do with it. Why? No one knows, because firstly, no one speaks their language, and secondly, they're not willing to teach their language to anyone else. In fact, they don't stop to explain. What happens is, if you get a boat and you try to go near North Sentinel Island, they won't even let you land. They'll come down to the beach and they'll start shooting arrows at your boat. I mean, there was this occasion where a few years ago where this I remember it's a Korean missionary, a guy, this Korean guy who said, I want to teach them the ways of the Lord. And so he gets his Bible and his crucifix, and he goes to North Sentinel Island against the orders of the Indian government to save the souls of these people. And he goes onto the beach and he says, "Welcome, brothers, I'm here to teach you the word of Christ." Holds up his Bible and that, and the North Sentinelese, well, how do they respond? They slashed his throat and they buried him on the beach. And that's what they do to anyone who lands on their island. And the Indian government has been quite clear about this, because the family obviously say, well, something's got to be done about this. This is murder. And the Indian government said, no, there will be no prosecutions as a result of this. He entered a total exclusion zone. We're very clear about, you have to leave those people alone. Just leave them be. Leave them alone. They want nothing to do with you, and we want nothing to do with them, basically. Now, is it possible? Is it possible that we humans on this planet are some kind of North Sentinelese? Are we those people with the equivalent in space that those people are on the Earth? Maybe we're the people, because what we don't shoot arrows, we shoot missiles. But you know, if a spaceship come and landed, man, flew in the air, what would we do? We would send up the military to defend our airspaces, which is fair enough, actually. It's just fair enough, because these things could be dangerous. But we wouldn't automatically open fire on them. But there is still a good chance that a spaceship flying in our atmosphere would get targeted by something. There's a good chance that would happen. And it could be you get some particularly trigger-happy general in NORAD HQ says, "Nuke the bastards now." So possible we are like that. We are exactly that kind of person. We're the kind of kid in the neighborhood that all the mothers don't want their sons to associate with. In which case, obviously, like if the North Sentinelese changed their ways and they sort of went down to the beach and they said they waved at passing shipping and said, "Look, we've changed our mind. We want to be friends," then that situation would end, wouldn't it? So it sort of ends with this slightly hippie-ish Dr. Stephen Greer kind of. I mean, I don't want to be too scathing, because I don't want to be too scathing about this, because I mean I agree with some of it. I don't go along with the sort of quite the sentiment that Greer and people like that do, but I still understand that it is an issue. We are because we have this tendency to violence and cruelty and destruction that the aliens are sort of like want to keep out of our way. I'm reading the Space Trilogy by C.S. Lewis at the moment. I've just finished the first book, Out of the Silent Planet, which it was written a long time ago, written in the 1930s, but it captures this very point that the Earth is sort of different to the rest of the universe. We're kind of like a black spot in the ocean. We're kind of like an island of darkness, or we're a spot where there's sort of like malevolence which doesn't exist elsewhere in the universe. I do wonder about that. There's a very quite long. Here we are. There's a long author's note here. It's worth reading. The author's note explains exactly where he got his research from. Sheldon. He mentions Gordon Cooper. He mentions Project Blue Book. He goes through a lot of things that we're familiar with. He talks about various countries and their various researches. He mentions Air Chief Marshal Lord Dowding. He mentions various people in France. He mentions the 1990 triangular flap, the Roswell incident, of course. And he goes and he talks about Majestic 12. I mean, I wouldn't read this. I wouldn't read all this, because I think that breaches fair use. But it's also stuff we've all heard of before. And Major Donald Kehoe, of course, who was an early pioneer trying to speak out. And then he mentions the Marconi deaths. And this is interesting, because in the space of just 6 years, 23 British scientists working for this industry on Star Wars type projects died. And it's interesting because that's kind of what happened to the characters in this book, the witnesses. And he mentions various people, including, of course, the Arshad Sharif, which of course was a very famous one, because this was an extremely bizarre and very gruesome suicide that took place in 1986. Arshad Sharif basically tied a chain around his neck. He padlocked a chain around his neck, padlocked the other end around a post, then drove off at high speed in his open top car. And of course his head just was ripped right off. Horrific. I mean, I feel sorry for the paramedic team that had to attend that one, and indeed the porters who had to deal with the remains. There's various other people. Someone jumped off Clifton Suspension Bridge. A couple of people just were missing, just declared missing. One guy was driving along a road, and suddenly, for no reason at all, on a completely empty road in good weather, he on a straight patch of road, he suddenly swerved off the road and crashed into a deserted little chef. Just crashed headlong into the side of the wall of this little chef. Very, very strange. And then was killed. Yeah. And there's a whole list of them here. There's 23 people at Marconi. Yeah. And then he goes on to talk about NASA and what they are doing. And he finishes with the letter, this famous letter from Colonel Gordon Cooper to the ambassador of Grenada. This is the time of the Grenada Initiative. Because if you remember, I think you remember, I've talked before about Sir Eric Gairy, the first Prime Minister of Grenada, and things like that. And he... And so Cooper actually writes to the Prime. I mean, I won't read the letter out, but it's quite famous. But he's very keen on supporting the Grenada Initiative. That is Gairy, who was also ambassador to the UN as well as Prime Minister of Grenada, wanting to bring the idea of UFO disclosure to the United Nations. As long ago, this is in 1977. This happened. It was all scuppered, of course, by the situation in Grenada with the coup d'état by Maurice Bishop. I've done an entire presentation on that. History of exopolitics. So this is, all in all, it's a very good book. If you haven't read it yet, you can't take part in a read party if you haven't read the book. And I've given you some spoilers now, but do please read it. I think it's very revealing about what kind of ideas were floating through Sidney Sheldon's head in his later period. That is, in the last decade of his life, or last few decades of his life. What he obviously came to become quite aware of certain things such as us, which, as far as I know, he never spoke openly about, but he did express them in his fiction. And I think I will go and see if I can read some more of his books from that period, from the sort of 1980s and 90s. To see if there's anything similar there, because yeah, he was getting quite tinfoil hat, I think, towards the end of his career. Yeah, so that's I do recommend that book. It's exciting. It's thrilling. It's fast. It's always nobody stops for a moment. The moment they reach someone, you think they're out of danger. Another danger comes along, and they have to run somewhere else. It's just very, very Dan Brown in that respect. And I understand why Dan Brown was inspired by this book. It really was. And indeed, there's another guy. He's a hip hop artist actually, who's incorporated influence. Yeah, Dan Brown, author of the Da Vinci Code, named the Doomsday Conspiracy as the book that inspired him to write thriller fiction himself, citing its simplicity of the prose and efficiency of the storyline. M.F. Doom, and that's him, adapted part of the texts for sample in his debut album Operation Doomsday. M.F. Doom is this guy. I'll show you. This is him. He died quite young. In 2020. Daniel, this is him there. He looks a bit like a secret agent there, doesn't he? But he has a supervillain stage persona, and he was very into this book, obviously. He was from London, yeah. And here, Operation Doomsday. Operation Doomsday. This was his album here. That's Dr. Doom from the Spider-Man comics, and he actually has some of the book. You see, some of the lyrics are based on text from the book. Yeah, from the book, The Doomsday Conspiracy. That's interesting, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah, it's obviously been a kind of book that a lot of people are interested in, and I'm interested in it. And yeah, please do check it out. So anyway, this is not the end. This is not the end of the read party. I'll do a live stream at some point, and if no one's read the book, then we'll just talk about other things related to it. Because of course, the subject matter of the book is something that, of course, we can talk about even if you haven't read the book. UFO crash retrievals, Roswell, aliens, things like that. Because let's face it, I do sometimes refer to that subject, don't I, in my output. My next video I'm probably going to do another live stream, actually, because I want to do one about the election. I wasn't going to, but I am now, because this general election coming next week. I think it's going to be a little more interesting than I was predicting. I thought it'd be really, really boring as hell. But all the signs are it's actually going to be one of the most interesting general elections ever. It may be a turning point. We shall see. And between now and then, I think so. I'll do that sometime. Between now and then, I might squeeze in another video about something or other. I'll see if I can do. There may be another emergency situation like the Assange case. Who knows? But in the meantime, thank you all of you for watching HPANWO TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.